Welcome back to the Humble Rising podcast. I am your host, Eddie V, and today's conversation is with Wendy Battles, who is the host of the Reinvention Rebels podcast, where she amplifies the voices of women who have boldly reimagined their lives in midlife and beyond. After finding her own fire at 54, Wendy now helps women move past fear, self-doubt, and outdated narratives so they can create lives rooted in purpose, possibility, and self-trust. And in this conversation, Wendy and I talk about what it really means to reinvent yourself in midlife. And here's what I love about Wendy's perspective. Reinvention, she says, is not always some big, dramatic life overhaul. Sometimes it starts with a quiet inner shift, a permission pivot, a moment where you decide to trust yourself enough to take one small, imperfect step toward what's calling you, or what might be lighting a fire within you, or what you're curious about. And in this episode, Wendy shares her own reinvention journey across different seasons of her life. From being a voice actor, yes, we got into that, it was amazing, to health coaching, to creating Reinvention Rebels. We talk about what it means to believe that you deserve something, especially happiness. And we delve into self-worth, fear, people-pleasing, the pressure women feel to ask for permission before investing in themselves, and how to listen for that inner wisdom, that inner knowing that is already within you and trying to guide you right now. So if you have been feeling the whisper or the screaming within, that something in your life or within you is ready for exploration, it's ready to be tapped into, this conversation will help you stop waiting for perfect clarity, because it will never come, and start moving with more self-trust. Here is my conversation with Wendy. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you, and I am really thrilled we're about to have this really important conversation about midlife.
I am too. And, there's so much to talk about midlife and rising. Your podcast is Humble Rising. We are rising.
Yeah.
And I'm excited.
Yes. Okay. So let's get right into it, because before we started recording, we were talking about a lot of good stuff. So let's start with what you talk about, which is that the idea of reinvention isn't about this like one massive dramatic overhaul, right? You talk about how it often begins with smaller steps and smaller acts of self-trust and giving yourself permission, and it builds and compounds over time. And so I'd love for you to just walk us through how you arrived at that and your own story.
I'd love to share. And I'm going to tell you, which might be true for you as well, and probably many people that are listening, is that we will reinvent ourselves again and again and again.
Yes.
Right. Whether we're in our 20s or our 30s or our 40s or our 60s, it doesn't matter what decade we might be in, but it's just the nature of life. We grow, we change, we seek new possibilities. We feel like we're ready for change. So I think we should just normalize the conversation by saying it's normal to reinvent ourselves, and many times over the course of a lifetime. And I will tell you about a little backstory about my origin story with reinvention, that I have done it, as like many of us listening, many, many times. I've done it in my 30s when I decided to become a voice actor. Now, I'm not saying also that all of these things were super successful.
Hold on. Wait.
What?
Wait, a voice? Hold on. Wait, a voice actor. Well, let's go back to that, because I want to understand how you made that shift even mentally, like your mindset wise, to say, I actually want to be a voice actor, and how that came to be. I'm taking a lot of notes, Wendy. This is going to be great.
It's funny because people used to always say, Wendy, you have a great voice. And this is how far back this was. This was in the 90s. And I took this course at this local place where you basically spend an evening learning about voiceovers. You do some practicing with other people in the class. They basically do it to sell you on putting together a demo tape. And so, I was all bought in there. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this. I made the demo tape. And this is so long ago. I live in the state of Connecticut. It was so long ago that they used to have a physical printed copy of this book of all the production studios in the state of Connecticut because they were trying to get the Department of Economic Development was trying to get film companies and producers to come and film in Connecticut. So I literally sent my cassette tape demo, not to date myself, but I am, to every production studio that was in this guide. And that's how I started getting work. I do this a lot. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I just go all in and have a mindset that I'll figure it out, even though I often start off and I'm clueless about it. And I'm like, will it all work out? That's usually my theory. It's all going to work out in the end. So that's literally how I got started. I'd never worked with producers before. I'd never taken direction from, I'd done acting in high school and college, but it wasn't like I was going to become an actor and go to Hollywood. It was just for fun because I enjoyed it. So it's not like I had a history of taking direction from people. And it was literally on the job training. On the job training. I was like, well, let me just give this a try. And there's just like anything in life, there are people that you connect with where you have this ease with which you can work with them. And there were some producers like that where I would get more steady work. And then there are producers where one time I got fired from a job because I couldn't do it the way they wanted it to. I went there, but I just couldn't quite do it. So, I eased in and I figured it out. But I ultimately realized that especially back then, this was not like a full-time job. This was not quitting my job to become a voice actor. I even met with a couple of agents and that didn't pan out because, it's hard. It's like being an actor. But there were a ton of people that did voiceover. There's the Donald Sutherlands of the world and the James Earl Jones of the world who have this distinct voice. And it was also a lot more male oriented then. So I gave up on that dream. I did it still on the side. I did it on the side. But then in my 40s, I was just in one of those nexus moments where I felt like something needed to change. My dad had passed away recently. I had this job that I didn't really love. I'm not a corporate person. And I hired a career coach and I really got onto this idea of health because I've gone to a lot of nutritionists. I've always been interested in being as healthy as possible. I got onto the idea of public health, getting a master's degree in public health. But then I decided it was going to take too long. I wasn't going to quit my job to do it. And going to school, and I just thought that's not for me. But I stumbled onto this idea of becoming a health coach. So I went to school on the weekends. I became a health coach. That's when I quit my job. Again, I don't really recommend unless you really know what you're doing, which I didn't know anything about running a business.
Wendy, that's another episode.
But, and I love the idea of helping people, but I also realized over time, because I never did it successfully, like I never did anything more than break even. And I realized that while I like coaching people, it wasn't my thing because I've come to realize now that my message is much broader. It's reaching more people. It's inspiring people. It's not doing one-on-one coaching, which I didn't know at the time, but you figure it out. So now here, fast forward to my 50s. Okay, I was like, this is it. Come on. Every decade, I've tried to figure out my greater calling because I always felt like I'd always had a career and then there's always been things I've been really good at doing work-wise and I've always been successful. But at the same time, I felt like something was missing, that there was something bigger. I had a greater calling. I couldn't figure out what it was. But in my 50s, when I was asked to be on the Future Leaders of Yale, so my daytime job is I work at Yale University in cybersecurity, and they'd asked me to be on this panel for our young leaders at Yale. And it was about personal branding. And I was like, what do I know? Personal branding. But, I'm always going to figure it out. They're like, will you do it? I'm like, of course. And then I'm like, but okay, what do I know about this? But I found a podcast that has been like a game changer for me. And the podcast is called package your genius.
Hold on. Who's the host of that? The host. She wrote a book.
What about
I have the book. A fellow entrepreneur. When I first started this journey, she sent me that book and she said, "Please read this book." And I said, "Will do."
oh my gosh.
It was really good.
That truly inspired me because if the whole premise was there is something that each of us does, and there could be 10,000 people that do what you do, but they don't do it the way that you do it. And so that was the idea. And I just really leaned into trying to figure out like, where is it that I shine? What do I love to do? What brings me the most joy? What would I do if I was not getting paid? And one day when I was meditating, I literally heard these two words, Reinvention Rebels, which is the name of my podcast. But at the time I was like, what does this mean? And I know enough to write things down when something feels significant because otherwise I usually forget by like the next day or the next hour. I was like, hello, what was that? That great thought that came by me that I can't remember what it was now. But I heard that and I something about that resonated with me. I didn't know at the time it was a podcast, but when I was a health coach, I'd worked with women. And here I was in midlife at 54 thinking, I want to do something that inspires women, that makes us more visible. Because I was starting to feel like that the beginning of as we age, we become invisible. And you have to really work at working on your visibility and sharing your truth and being bold and not feeling like you're being erased by society. Well, it doesn't really happen in your 50s, but it continues though. So I just one day I realized it was a podcast. I didn't know again anything about starting a podcast. I listened to podcasts all the time. I had no clue. And it's not like it's rocket science. We both host podcasts. It's not like it's impossible to figure out. It's just one more thing that when we decide we want to do something, we can figure out the way to make it happen. Even if we start off and we don't have any idea, we can ask people, we can Google it, we can ask ChatGPT, we can talk to people we know. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can figure something out. And that's literally what happened. I got started, and my idea really was share stories of women over 50 that are reinventing themselves in bold ways. The opposite of the shrinking and falling into the background, but in these bold ways to demonstrate to other women that maybe are unsure or don't feel as confident that if so and so can do this, I could have my own version. My story is going to be different than her story, but I can own my story. I can reinvent in a bold way, whatever that might be, and show the world what's possible. And that was literally the seeds of how it started. But the truth of the matter, Harvey, even though I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, is that I was doing what I now call the permission pivot, which is all about this internal process. It's the mindset shift that says, I am worth it to invest in myself and believe in myself and trust myself.
Wait, Wendy, we have to stop there because that I am worth it to believe in myself and to invest in myself. Can I just share an observation that I'm sure you've seen this, and I love your views on it, which is that I find that women have a much more difficult time believing that than men do. And I say that because I coach men and women, and I'm just going to be totally transparent. When I'm on a discovery call, usually when I get a call, it's usually a referral, right? And so I know this person in some way. They're connected to me in some way. It's usually not cold. And when we start talking, men are usually like, yes. They make the decision right there. They're in, right? And by the way, Wendy, because I'm all over the place, meaning like I'm on LinkedIn, you can look me up and know exactly my style very quickly, right? So you kind of know if I'm your cup of tea or not your cup of tea. And so, but when I talk to women, I'm not saying all women, because there are plenty of women I meet with who are all in at that moment and they sign up and we get to work and it's fantastic. But there are many more women who they hesitate. And I don't think it's because they don't want to. They do.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this
Yes.
deep-seated belief of needing permission. And so it's often, let me check with so and so. Let me just make sure. Like there's self-doubt. I really need this. I want this. I'm committed, but like I don't know. And I do believe it's deep-seated in, do I deserve this thing?
That's exactly it. I feel like underlaying all of that is the true subtext. Am I worth it?
Yeah.
Do I deserve this? Well, I mean, I've seen that in myself for years. And now I'm trying to excavate that and shift that. But I think so much of that is how we are raised to be compliant, to be people pleasers, to not rock the boat. So that's why we have to awaken this idea of self-permission,
Yes.
because we've been told, well, should you really want that, Arity? Really? Should you really want to have your own business, be a kick-ass coach, have a podcast, be a motivational speaker, write a book? Should you all that?
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Right. Isn't that kind of a lot?
But also because of the Wendy and you mentioned this earlier, is there is this not just a mindset shift, but there's this massive identity shift. Like when you see yourself as actually you are, which is this massive, powerful person who has all these innate gifts and abilities. And when you start seeing how you can use those, it is terrifying as much as it is exciting. Because what am I going to do with that? I've never given myself permission to express and explore that because of what you said. There are rules. I check boxes. I'm compliant. I get rewarded. And then you go to the professional world and you go to life after school, like life, and there is no more blueprint. It's like, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And then for years, you're like, wait, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this, huh? And it's like, yep, this is the game. This is what you got to like the master of your own kind of game in a way that is, I always say we all have a purpose in life, and it's to be like fully ourselves and fully alive and fully expressed. Like you may not have like an overarching life purpose of like healing people or something like that, but everyone deserves to feel alive in their life. And that looks so different, like you said, for everybody. But I love this framing of like self-permission and self-trust and this worthiness, which I agree, Wendy, even in my coaching, there's this underbelly of lack of like worthiness and enoughness. And when we talk about it, the problem is I think people have overused the language of enoughness and worthiness, like people self-care now. So it's lost its meaning, but it's still true. Like the root is still that.
100%. And I think we have to offer ourselves a lot of grace because we've been basically duped into this very patriarchal system of how we should be very simply. It's not like they're like, I'm getting all these messages about how, no, I mean, it's not obvious at all. It's
like we're not sitting there being like, yes, message received. I will do that now. It's not like that. Yes.
Not at all. And so I think that it takes, just as it took years of us being this way, it takes years of us undoing this basically programming about how we should be as women. And so I think we have to offer ourselves grace when it comes to appreciating that we're learning things about ourselves. And I think that I remember too that sometimes the most difficult people, at least it's been true in my life, teach me the biggest lessons. And it's not like I'm like, oh, I want to learn this hard lesson because I don't know. In another lifetime, I didn't learn it. No, who says that? We're presented with certain circumstances. It's sort of like, how do we choose the people we choose, whether it's a job, when we end up with a boss that's not very supportive, or it's a spouse, or it's, a friend that ends up being like a toxic friendship or whatever it is. Well, I do feel like those people teach me the biggest lessons. that I can then apply. And as someone who's going through like a horrible divorce that has turned so unfortunately, just not at all how I would have wanted it to turn out, but it's all the lessons about learning how to, in this case, stand up for myself in a new way and to say, I'm worth being happy. I deserve to be happy. I was not put on this earth to be miserable for the rest of my life. And so I think that goes back to that sometimes we need to just go easy on ourselves. Sometimes we have to see that we're growing and learning as we go. Sometimes it takes us many times and patterns to get back in our own lives and say enough is enough. And that's okay. That's all part of, I feel like, our evolving into, as you're saying, who we're meant to be.
Yeah, there's this ripeness. I feel like we have to get to be ripe and
Yes.
see ourselves where we're at in a ripe state. I had a friend who I had coffee with her, maybe I want to say a few months ago, and her and I were talking, and she's a friend from law school. I hadn't seen her in a while. I mean, we're close, but I hadn't seen her in person in a while. And she said to me, "You know what, Evie? Happiness is really important too." And people say that all the time. It's like happiness is important. But it's different when you're in a different state of mind and emotional state. When you hear happiness and someone says happiness is important too, and it's almost like a reflection back of like, wait, so how am I really unhappy? And actually, I do deserve to be happy, is what you were saying, right? And what does that mean for me? And I deserve that. Like I deserve to create that for myself and make decisions that are aligned with that level of I would say like more alignment within, right? So I do think there's this ripeness. You have to be ripe. And when you were mentioning your story, you mentioned that your father had passed away. And I think sometimes people people tend to be more ripe when there's an external kind of something happens, like they experience a loss or something is shifting, like something external has shifted, or like there is, I think it's rare, but internal, like there is something internal that like comes up from within and is like, we need to adjust some things. Like this is no longer fitting who we are anymore. So what are we going to do with that? And I'm wondering from your work, with reinvention and midlife, what have you seen to be maybe the biggest barrier? Maybe it's also what we've been talking about, right? The self-worth, the not giving yourself permission. But what do you feel like is this biggest barrier for people to move through and enter really that reinvention kind of evolution? Like what really, like people who know but then don't move forward, what do you think are the biggest obstacles there?
I think fear of failure and fear of success. What if I'm amazingly successful? I think that's scary for women often because, well, we're told basically to not want that much or to kind of keep it contained. Don't get too big for your britches, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I think both fear of failure, because like, what if I do it and it doesn't work out? I'm going to look bad. I'm going to be embarrassed. I already have the naysayers that saying, really, Wendy, do you really think you can do that? So I think that both of those things are real. I also think that sometimes we don't know how. I think what gets in the way is that we might have a dream. And I always feel like for reinvention, we talked about at the beginning, it's not necessarily this big bold thing, but it really is all the tiny steps. And sometimes it's hard to know how to get started because I feel like if we just take that one step, one imperfect step, like my one step when people kept saying, you've got a great voice, is that I signed up for this course, this one night course that was like $47 to, because I just thought, well, that seems like a pretty good way to explore it without this huge cost. It's not like a $2,000 coaching course or something. It's like $47. I can afford that. Then I then paid a lot of money to make a demo tape, but still, like after that, I took that one step and then I was like, oh, it was confirmed for me when I went to that one night course. You do have a great voice. And, I kind of got started from there. So I think part of it is we get caught up in sometimes that big goal or dream and then we don't always have a roadmap or trust ourselves enough to just even get started with one step. One imperfect, I'm not sure what I'm doing kind of step, which I've done so many times. It's like, I'm going to go for it. I usually think, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work out. And sometimes when things don't work out, it's a detour in the right direction anyway. That if we hadn't had the willingness to take that leap, then we wouldn't have found out maybe that didn't work to redirect us to something that's a better fit. So I always, when I look back, even though I didn't think of it at the time, it's not like I thought at the time, I'm so good at betting on myself. It's never said that. Now I look back and I see this pattern of I've bet on myself many times in many different ways. I've taken risks that have often paid off, but not always. But even if they haven't, I've learned something. So I think that looking back, I was much more confident than I thought, even though in the moment it wasn't like I'm full of confidence. Well, often it was like taking knees, thinking, I'm going to just try this and see what happens. And there's always another way, though, if it doesn't work out. There's always another way. I also think that we can, especially women, again, going back to like how this impacts women so much, I think because we often are afraid to ask for permission, we're also afraid to fail because the people who are in our ear doesn't work out. Are you too old for that? Are you really sure that's a good idea? The naysayers, those naysayers, they can get into our psyche and talk us out of what our intuition is telling us. That calling, that you talked about that ripeness when we feel like we are just ripe for whatever this thing is. And then we're like, but so and so said, oh, I'm not sure. I think that's a huge factor sometimes in preventing us from trusting that feeling we already have and going for it, whatever that thing might be. It could be the smallest little step. So I think our ability to get beyond, not listen to those people or find a core of people who we trust.
Mm.
We can trust our hopes and dreams with, who will encourage us, who can be our mini board of directors, who can be our sounding board, who can be our truth teller, who can give us a gentle nudge we need when we're like, I don't know. And they're like, just do it. Just take that small step. I think that's the antidote to the naysayers that get in our way and often prevent us from taking this often really good idea that we need to plant that seed and water. It's not, because I think also we can get stuck on, I want this instant success, which of course is ridiculous because for almost anything in life, unless you just happen to be incredibly lucky, everything takes a lot of effort and it takes intention and it takes doing it and practicing it and getting better at it. So I think all those things can get in the way of us moving forward. Fear of success, fear of failure, the naysayers, etc. So trying to clear a path so that we can get started, to me, is key to all of this.
Yeah, Wendy, the need to have people in your life who are supportive of you and to, instead of saying things like, are you sure? Like, well, how are you going to do that? But then have you figured that out? Yeah, well, what, and because you can ask a person questions in a way that's helpful.
Yes.
Like you can ask a question that's like, oh, hey, if you need help figuring out, how to plan your next like 3 months, like let me know. I'm happy to help you. There are ways to ask a question that's helpful instead of asking the question in a way that is received, as a judgment, right? Because no one wants to be judged, no one wants to be rejected. I find that the most helpful people, like for me, not even as an entrepreneur, but just in the different pivots I had that I, shared with you earlier, right? Is having people who would say to me, no matter what you do, you're going to be successful. And by the way, there was no definition of success they had because I was doing different things. Like I was kind of pivoting along the way. But I think what they meant was whatever you want to do, you're going to get there around that area. Maybe not the thing, but like around that area because of people's belief in you. And that's so powerful, Wendy, when there are days when I don't have much belief, right? Like days are hard. Like as an entrepreneur, it's hard. It's hard.
Hard.
And there are days where you need to borrow someone else's belief in you and be like, nope, they told me sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. Or like you have a belief like this isn't gonna work. And then and then you tell yourself the opposite. This is gonna work and it's gonna be amazing. Back into it. Like you're just like you have to shift mindset and thought work very, very quickly.
Yes.
And I find that what helps me the most is having people in my life who are also on not necessarily an entrepreneur journey, but people in my life who are also exploring. Like they may have like a full-time, very intense job, but they're exploring something about themselves outside of the job that's new and different. And they're being curious about that. And they're also unlearning some things like we've talked about. They're unlearning some beliefs that aren't serving them. And they're being curious about who they are now and what that means for them. And I find being in that kind of supportive environment, even though most of my friends who are in those places don't know each other well, right? I have different kind of pockets of friends. It's so helpful because I always have someone I can text and say, I'm having a rough day. And then there's always someone to say, oh, let me tell you something, right? And it's so much more helpful than trying to be on an island, right? Like when
100%.
to your podcast, you're like, oh, I feel seen. I feel like I'm known a little bit more, right? But how powerful would it be for someone to have, not just Wendy on the podcast, but like Wendy actually talking to them personally and being like, this is what's possible for you. So powerful to have that. And the other thing I wanted to raise that you said, which is I really want people listening to hear it, is how Wendy, you said, it's not like when I was doing these things, I was telling myself, yeah, here I go betting on myself. I'm so confident because that's not what you are thinking. However, I am convinced that confidence and resilience, because it's a lot of resilience in that in your story, is about you doing the thing and you saying to yourself, I'm going to figure this out. And however this ends, I will be okay. I will figure it out. There's so much about resilience that's in that and confidence of I trust myself. And if it doesn't work out, okay, but I've tried this. So now I know, right? The worst is to like not try. And then I'm sure you've heard of there are plenty of books about regret, a bunch of research on regret. And Bronnie Ware, who wrote The Top Regrets of the Dying, like she says, like the number one regret is that people who are dying shared with her is that, they regret not living a life true to them and one that was expected of them. Like they wish they had the courage to live a life true to them, not the one expected of them. And so a lot of what you're talking about is how we have to unlearn the compliance framework that we operate within. And these lanes, we feel like we have to stay in these lanes. And oftentimes it's because of what we're seeing around us, Wendy. It's people who stay in their lanes.
100%.
So we're like, oh, we can't, we're tribal by nature. Like we can't deviate from the group. We won't be accepted. That's not okay. And so there's so much of what you're talking about that's so rich and full of depth, that multi-layered. It's all multi-textured.
Yes. Yes. And I look back and I think that all of us were evolving. And I know that there's not necessarily a timetable. Each of us I feel like, is on our own unique journey. We are learning the things we need to learn at the right time.
Right time.
And I also remember that two things can be true at the same time. You can be really confident in one area of your life and feel like you're a basket case in the other.
Amen.
So, I think we have to, again, offer ourselves grace because there are the areas where we shine, where we're like, I am so good at this. And then the areas where like, I don't effing know what I'm doing. And so both those things can be true. Like we can feel confident in one thing and not at all in another thing, and that's okay. And so I think if we remind ourselves of that I don't have to be good at every single thing, because I'm going to tell you, girl, I did not get in the line for being good at relationships. I am so good at so many things, but that was like an area where I was like, and so because yeah, I'm evolving. Now I'm working on that area. Now I'm like realizing I've been people pleasing, accommodating, appeasing for years. I'm not doing that stuff anymore. So we can come into ourselves. It goes back to that ripeness that you're talking about. Like I am ripe for self-discovery about that part of my life. And, I felt like it was, again, it's yet another reinvention. I'm reinventing myself by getting out of this marriage so that I can be happy. And that's a whole new path for me. But it's so exciting because I already feel so much lighter. And the hardest part was even having the conversations and then like doing the filing.
Yeah.
And but now I'm like, and we're still going through the process, but I'm like, I'm doing this and I'm not putting up
Wendy,
with this crap ever again.
what was that first step for you? Because we talked about these small steps for even your relationship and resolving it. What was that first step for you? Because I'm sure a lot of women listening are going through something similar and are scared.
I bet you were right. And I think one of the first steps for me was talking to my therapist about what do I actually say to start a conversation. It's not like I'm just going to serve some papers without talking about it, right? So it's like, how do I even get into this conversation? That was scary to even, but you know what I did? I started talking about it with her, and then I actually wrote a script. She said, why don't you write a script of what you, and it's not like I was going to read the script, but I needed that as structure because for me, especially as someone who does a ton of speaking like you do, I need to know, I need to internalize the message. I need to know it like the palm of my hand. So I did a lot of practicing because that makes me feel confident when I practice it. So I feel like I can embody it. And I was still nervous because there's no easy way to get into a conversation like this. It's like, whatever you start with, I want to talk to you about something. Whatever the version of that is, people immediately are like, oh God, what is it? Which is exactly what happened. Oh God, what is it? There's no easy way to ease into this. But it was the catalyst I needed to have like this conversation. And, since then, I've had so many epiphanies working with my therapist about this and about like my own personal journey and things that have happened that at the time I couldn't just follow what it was because I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know how to put words to it. But looking back, I realized, oh, I felt so embarrassed. I mean, this is a very good person, but I felt so embarrassed at different times of being with this person. And it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm so embarrassed by this. But it was going to therapy, being willing to explore that helped me uncover and put words to some of these things that has really helped me move forward. So just that first conversation, though, was a great catalyst. And then there were many more difficult conversations. And it's hard because, just because I feel something doesn't mean the other person wants to accept that thing. And even when you try to tell someone something as compassionately as you can with care, it still doesn't mean that they're going to accept that thing. So I've learned so many lessons, though, so many lessons about myself. And I think one of probably the most important lesson I've learned, which I think is true for all of us, we are so much stronger than we think. We're so much more capable than we think. And if we truly look back at moments where we stood in our power and did hard things, so much, the accumulation of all those things is probably much greater than we think of when we're thinking, well, I don't know about this. I don't feel very confident. But when we really excavate and look back, we've done so many more things than I think we often give ourselves credit for.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you talk about even, if you're talking about divorce, you're talking about exploring a new career for folks who are exploring a new just passion they have, or they've always been called to something and they're taking like small steps toward that. Wendy, what would be your like number one piece of wisdom I know this is hard because by the way, there's so many nuggets of wisdom in this episode. By the way, if you're listening, listen to it again because she also said something so important in what she was saying, which is that when you practice something, you embody it. So many of you listening ask me, hey, I understand this intellectually and logically, but I'm not like feeling it. And I say you have to practice, you have to experience it in your body for it to be embedded, for you to embody. So that's why it's embody. You feel it in your body so you feel like it's true for you, not just that you understand it logically. So please go back and listen to this episode. There's so many things that I couldn't even ask Wendy about that are critical in terms of how you think about yourself and what's possible for you. So please, please go back and listen to it. Wendy, okay, one piece of wisdom that you want to leave someone with when we're talking about, being the architect of your life, reinventing yourself, going through this evolution that we're talking about.
I think that what is most important is the idea that we already have all the answers. It may not be obvious to us because we're like, wait a minute, I'm in this situation and I just don't get it or know what to do. But for me, that means go with answers are within us. This idea of embodying something that comes from within.
Mm.
It's that feeling that you mentioned that we can tune into a feeling. And it's been my experience and what I've seen with so many other people that if we are open and willing to get more through it, slow down our roll because so many of us are running around with good reason. We have jobs, we've got families, we've got, we have all the things. But I feel like my greatest teacher is listening to what's bubbling up from within. That's how I heard Reinvention Rebels. That's how I started the podcast. That's how I'm going to turn my podcast into the Reinvention Rebels TV show. All these things, but that came from this whisper. That came from the wisdom. We all are wise and we have this wisdom within us. And if we could slow down, our path wouldn't have to be so hard because we could listen to what our soul is trying to tell us and use that to help guide us. And not like every single decision, but the broader guidance of what lights me up. What do I love to do? What inspires me? What would I do if I wasn't even gonna get paid, but I just was doing it for the love of doing it? What would that be? Whatever the things are, no matter where you are in your life, whether, as you said, it's like a new career, it's a relationship, it's your body, it's, I talk a long time about our midlife changing bodies, and how that happens and, how we can start to feel more comfortable in them. But whatever those things are, if we can start with there, that to me is a powerful catalyst for almost any possibility.
So beautifully said, Wendy. And so to help everyone out, Wendy, do you have any ideas of where someone can start? So do you have any resources where someone can start with that in terms of their own journey?
Absolutely. One of the simple things that I talk about in reinventing is just this idea of getting started. So one thing I can offer up is just a free gift I have called 100 Ways to Reinvent Yourself. It's just great ideas because sometimes we do need that catalyst. Sometimes it's not enough. Like I could be all up in my own head and not be able to figure anything out. I can get very stuck. So sometimes those outside resources can be helpful to be a spark plug about what could be possible. So it's just a really great list of ideas to begin to get you thinking about perhaps seeing beyond, because I do think that we often have our own self-imposed limitations. Well, I don't think I could do that. I know so-and-so is doing that, but me doing that, I don't know about that. So it's some great ideas to help you start thinking about it because I think it always goes back to, again, let's get started. Let's take that one simple step. So this is just a simple step to ignite something that can help you think about what could be possible. And I think the combination of that and the other thing I'll say is just spending more time with you. So going for a walk by yourself without your phone and paying attention to what's around you, sitting quietly to meditate, even if it's only 5 minutes. I think that when we prioritize ourselves, even if it's in tiny little increments, because I know not everyone has an hour to do something. Not everyone has an hour to work out or go for a walk, but most of us have 5 or 10 minutes in between meetings. I started the podcast by getting up at 4:45 every morning to work on it because I have a full-time job. And so we find a way when we really want to do something. As my mother used to always remind me, young lady, you seem to have time to to get together with your friends. Our mamas will be.
Yep. Felt like annoyance.
Right.
true. Now I'm like, oh, that's what she was talking about. Right.
I know. Couldn't appreciate it back then, though. You know how that goes.
Wendy, so where can people find you? I'm going to throw the link to any resources you offer in that 100 Ways to Reinvent Yourself. I'll throw that link in the show notes, and anything else you're sharing. And I'll throw any links to how people can find you as well. So where can people find you? How confident what you're doing?
All the ways, as I'm sure you'd say too.
Yes.
All the ways. On Instagram, I'm at Reinvention Rebels. On LinkedIn, I'm Wendy Battles. So those are probably the two platforms where I spend the most time socially. My website, reinventionrebels.com. The Reinvention Rebels podcast, of course, as you know, is available on your favorite podcast platform. All the ways. And I'll mention one more thing that I mentioned before, but I also have another great gift called the Do It Scared Guide. Do It Scared, Do It Anyway, because I know so many of us are scared, like, can I? Will I? What will people say? Whatever. So that's another great resource. I'll send you the link to that as well, as just another resource to help you get out of the starting block so that we can, we all have these amazing lives that we can live, big or small. And when I say amazing life, I don't mean like I'm going to become famous like Oprah. That's not what I mean. I mean living our own very best life. And that could be anything, big or small. It's whatever we dream it to be. And the potential is in each one of us. Everyone listening, we have this potential to live our best life, but we need to do the work to figure it out. And I think that is joyful work. That's sometimes scary work. That's also incredibly meaningful work. So if we're open to doing that work, on the other side of our doubts, there is so much possibility.
I'm going to leave it right there. It was wonderful. Wendy, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm so glad that we met and that we were able to have this conversation. This is such a blessing to everyone listening. I know I can picture people in my mind who are going to so appreciate this and are going to run to your podcast and run to your lists and your resources. So thank you so much for the work you do and for being such a bright, shining light. And yeah, just for being you and for your own journey and all you're going to share with everyone who really needs to hear your message and needs to feel more expressed and alive in their own lives. This is such a gift to them. So thank you.
And thank you. It has been an honor and a pleasure to join you. I love seeing you shine and in your lane where you are a natural and you're gifted at this. So it's a mutual admiration club.
Thank you, Wendy. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for spending this time with me on the Humble Rising podcast. I hope today's conversation left you with a new perspective, a little encouragement, or the reminder you needed to keep moving forward with confidence and intention. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone in your life who could use it too. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a rating or review. It helps more people discover these conversations and become part of our growing community. And if you'd like more support on your growth journey, be sure to check out the show notes for additional resources and ways to connect with me. Until next time, remember, you have the power to lead, work, and live in a way that feels purposeful, fulfilling, and true to you.